Let's review Unit 1 for AP Human Geography. I have some resources, multiple choice and free response practice tests. I have a key terms list on the different vocab you need to know, as well as a longer, more in-depth lecture with guided notes that follow along. I also get this content from the course and exam description, which is an outline, essentially the curriculum that the College Board sets for this course. It tells you what's going to be on the AP exam and how it's going to be tested. So let's get started. So geography deals with maps. You're going to see a ton of different maps throughout this course. Now we have two different types of maps. We have reference maps and we have thematic maps. Reference maps just shows basic geographic information like physical features like water bodies, mountains, deserts. They can also show political data like boundaries between countries or regions. This map here shows qualitative data. It's non-numerical. It deals with qualities of places. We can look and see where different regions are, like Asia or South America. We can also look and see where different countries are, like France, the United States, or India. We also have thematic maps, which focuses on a specific theme or a phenomenon or a trend, like population density, population size. It can be fertility rates or just the number of people over the age of 70. It can deal with both qualitative, which is non-numerical, and quantitative data, which is numerical. Thematic maps with different shades are called choropleth maps, and these are the ones you're probably most familiar with, are the ones with different shades, like this one here on the right. We can look at presidential outcomes through elections in the state of Maine, as well as the governor in 2014. Different shades represent different outcomes: blue Democratic, red Republican, and they're influenced by quantitative data, the percentage of the votes. When the percentage is more Democratic, then they're going to be blue. When it's more Republican, it's going to be red. We have different types of thematic maps too. This one's called an isoline map, and it's where different lines represent different values. It's kind of like a choropleth map and can show shading. However, it's a lot less specific to a certain entity. We can see here that the further north you get, the colder the average temperature is. On the right, we have a dot distribution map. Each dot represents the same value, and it's good to see clusters and dispersals. Clusters are where things accumulate. They're close together. Dispersed means more spread out. So we can see that population is more dispersed in Northern Territory than it is in New South Wales. Population is clustered in the eastern region of Australia. It's good to show population data. This is called a cartogram, and it distorts the size of countries and other entities based on the size. So the bigger the value, the bigger the country will be. So India, China, those countries have the highest populations in the world, so they're going to be the biggest on the map. The one on the right is called a graduated symbol map, and it uses different symbols or one symbol to represent value. In this case, the different size of the symbol impacts the value. So the smaller the drop, the smaller the value. The bigger the symbol, the bigger the value. In this case, we're talking about withdrawals of water in millions of gallons per day. So more water is being withdrawn in the south than in the north. Let's go over absolute and relative distance. Absolute distance is a measure of physical space between locations, or you could do people. So it's just an actual distance, like 310 kilometers or 12 miles. Relative distance is a relationship. It's a description between two locations or people. So you could say that the flight is 2 hours, or flying to Europe is more expensive than flying to the United States. Absolute versus relative direction. Direction that's absolute uses the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. Or you could say something like 48 degrees southeast. Maine is north of Virginia. Relative direction depends on an observer's current position and orientation. It can vary from person to person. So you could say, turn left at the stoplight to reach the theater. The toy store is 3 blocks away. Or you could say something like, the gas station is around the corner. These are all descriptions that depend on where you are. They're not the same for two people. Absolute location is the exact spot on Earth a certain place is. We can do this with latitude, longitude, our coordinates, or we could do this with an address. Relative location is a description of how a place is related to others, such as landmarks. You could say the car wash is next to the firm. Relative directions and distances can also be relative locations. All maps are wrong for a degree. So we have the Earth, a 3D sphere. It is impossible to take this sphere and plant it on a 2D plane. You just can't. So you're going to create some distortion here. So all 2D maps of some kind have some kind of distortion. So we can distort shape, we can distort distance between places, direction, as well as area. And when we talk about area in this course, we're talking about the size of the countries. So this first projection is called the Mercator projection. It's the same one that Google Maps uses. You're probably familiar with it. The further away you get from the equator, the closer to the poles, the bigger the countries seem to be. Look at Greenland. It looks huge compared to Africa. You can fit many Greenlands inside of Africa, but it doesn't appear that way because it's distorted. Antarctica also looks really big as well. On the right, we have the Robinson projection. This is a compromise projection. So it distorts everything, shape, distance, direction, and area, but it minimizes the overall distortion by doing that. You probably have heard of the term toponyms in your course. This just means a place name. So Istanbul in Turkey is a toponym. London, England is a toponym. England is a toponym. Europe's a toponym. It's a place name that can be long or short, that sort of thing. Maps can show physical data, which relates to the actual earth, the environment. It could show elevation, freshwater access. It could show soil quality or types of soil or climate zones. Thematic data deals with people and culture and human interaction. We can see here the preferred restaurants in different states in the United States. That doesn't have anything to do with the physical environment. It has to do with human interaction and human culture and human interest. GPS versus GIS. A GPS like the one in your phone right now can be used to identify absolute location, direction, and distance. It can optimize pizza delivery times and routes. It can dispatch emergency response units. It can track tagged wildlife. It can get you from place to place where you don't know where you need to go. A GIS, a Geographic Information System, captures, analyzes, and displays geographic reference information. So telecommunications or weather forecasting or even urban planning like zoning, land use, infrastructure development. Google Maps is a great example of a GIS. You can create different layers of different data. So here we have from the University of Central Florida a map of the school. We can also locate where parking is or where food is or traffic, EV charging, emergency, all of these different geographically related information onto a map for us. Remote sensing. This is where you acquire information like geographic information about an object or a phenomenon without making physical contact. In this case, we typically use satellite imagery and they detect energy that's reflected from the Earth. So let's talk about scale. Scale is the relationship between the portion of Earth being studied and Earth as a whole, and scale determines how much data we are given about a place. So here we have a global scale. We are looking at the life expectancy across different countries across the globe. That's why it's a global scale. That's what we're looking at. We can't really get any more specific though. We can't see what's inside the countries though, unfortunately. This is a national scale because we are looking at a specific country. We're looking at Belgium and the rail map. We're looking at the rail map, the different rail tracks within this country. What about this one? What is the scale? What are we looking at? We're looking at Europe, which is a continent. So we're looking at a continental scale. What about this one? We're looking at Western Africa, which is a region of Africa. We're looking at population density. So we're looking at a regional scale. Satellite imagery. How might a satellite image be used at a national scale? It can be used for a variety of reasons. National agencies can use the image to allocate federal disaster relief funds and resources to the affected areas more efficiently. In this case, we had an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and satellite imagery took pictures and analyzed the affected area to see the extent of the damage and made a plan on what to do next. We could also use it for national infrastructure projects like interstates, map out where terrain is available to build interstates. How might a satellite image be used at a local scale, at a specific city or town? Farmers can use the imagery to monitor soil quality or water usage. Local governments can use imagery for zoning or land use planning, like where certain towns are going to go or where certain buildings will go. We also have the national census, which is a count of the population in a particular area. So the United States conducts the census every 10 years, and they typically do this with door-to-door surveying. The exception being in 2020 when they did it through the mail or through online. But we can get data like the population size, the change in population size. It records information like age, gender, or occupation of the residents within a particular area. On this map here, we can get different racial demographics within Louisiana, and we can actually do this with every state within the United States. It's a very effective way to get an idea of who's living in a country and where people are moving to and from. Now, who would use the national census? Government agencies, like they want to know which counties need more schools because more children are moving in. What about more housing to support population growth, as well as transportation facilities? Businesses can use it as well. Retailers may analyze data to identify target markets, decide on store locations, and tailor marketing strategies to based on consumer demographics like culture and age, or even income. income. If you're a very high income, high threshold company that needs a lot of money to stay afloat, you're not going to build a location somewhere that's pretty poor. You're going to build it somewhere that's a little bit more wealthier. Dollar General caters to the lower income individuals, so you're going to build more frequently and in areas that see lower incomes. Distance decay. Look at all this math here. There's no math on the AP exam, so don't worry about it. Distance decay says the strength of a relationship between people, places, or systems decreases as the separation between them increases. So if there's more space between you, there's going to be less interaction. You're less likely to travel somewhere further. There's more distance. It's probably more expensive. You have less knowledge of that place, and there's probably a lower need. If you need to buy pencils, you're going to go to the local store like Walmart. You're not going to go 2 states away to buy pencils. What about time-space compression? Time-space compression is a phenomenon where advancements in transportation technology like air travel, boats, high-speed rail, even cars, as well as communication technology like telephones, the media, the internet, reduce the relative distance between places. And this effectively makes the world feel a lot smaller because you can communicate across the world and you can get across the world a lot quicker. You can travel more quickly to more places and exchange more information, ideas, and goods. It facilitates cultural exchange. It took Columbus 61 days to travel to the Bahamas from Spain, but today you can do that in less than 1 day. What about patterns? What are patterns? You know what patterns are. It's the arrangement of something, in this case, objects on the Earth's surface in relation to one another. So the pattern for where Chick-fil-A restaurants are located is that they're located on the eastern region of the United States, and the west, not so much. Sustainability. This is a big concept in human geography, particularly when we're talking about how humans use land. Sustainability is when you use Earth's resources in a manner that doesn't withdraw their use in the future. You're not using up all the resources, so future populations no longer have them. It ensures a balance between meeting current needs and preserving resources for the upcoming generations. Now let's talk about determinism and possibilism. So environmental determinism states that the natural environment plays the biggest role in influencing social and cultural development. It explains why we typically live near the coast because of access to water. But we don't live in Antarctica because it's very cold. It's very harsh to live there, and you can't really grow crops very well. Possibilism states that yes, the environment limits us to an extent, but people can adjust and alter their environments and overcome the limitations. So yeah, people can't build cities on top of the Hudson River that easily, but we can build bridges that can go across the Hudson River. We can also plant farms in urban areas on roofs. What is scale of analysis? Scale of analysis is different than scale. Scale of analysis is essentially what is the data being compared between. It's the spatial extent to what is being studied. That's the fancy term here. So here we have a map of the world, a global scale, but it's not a global scale of analysis because the data is being compared between countries. So it's a country scale of analysis. Here we have a map of Brazil. We're looking at different regions within Brazil, which is smaller than a country. So we're looking at a subnational scale of analysis because the different entities within Brazil, which is a nation, are smaller. Sub means below, so subnational. The scale is national, but the scale of analysis is subnational. Let's look at some more. What is the scale of analysis? Here we have a map of Tennessee, which is a state in the United States. So the scale is subnational, but the scale of analysis is county because we're comparing tax revenues per county. That's what the data is being compared between. What about this map? It's showing river flow alterations between different areas of the world. The world is being shown, so that's a global scale, but what's the scale of analysis? The data isn't being confined to any particular area, so it's going to be a global scale of analysis. What about this one? We're not looking at a map anymore, but we're looking at a chart. Well, we're looking at different populations between areas of the world, particularly continents. So we're comparing population between continents. That's a continental scale of analysis. What about this one? We're looking at Italy, which is a country. So we're looking at a country scale, but we're looking at very specific areas within Italy, more local areas. So this is a local scale of analysis. What about this one? We're looking at the United States, so a national scale, but we're looking at different regions within the United States. So we're looking at a regional scale of analysis. Subnational may also work because these entities are all smaller than the country. Now let's look at regions a little bit more. Regions are defined on the basis of one or more unifying characteristics or some kind of pattern of activity. So they have something that creates the region, something particular to that place. Now in AP Human Geography, you need to know major regions of the world. So the College Board created this map for you to essentially memorize and know where different countries are throughout the world, where Western Africa starts and ends, where Micronesia is, where Siberia is, where Eastern Europe is, that sort of thing. So it's very important that you understand this map and kind of have it memorized. Now there are three types of regions you need to know. The first one is called a formal region, also known as a uniform region, and these are the ones that are not up to interpretation. These are recognized across the world, like political boundaries or something else that's bound by a legal treaty, something like Massachusetts or Scotland. These are regions within countries. Property lines, like where houses are located, electoral districts, or even just where people live, like the Catalan-speaking regions of Spain. That's not up to interpretation. We know where people speak this minority language within Spain. Antarctica is also a formal region. Vernacular regions are also called perceptual regions, and they may vary amongst different people, organizations. They're up to interpretation. They vary from person to person. The South, where does the South start? Where does the South end? Some people don't include Florida in the South. Some people do. What about Silicon Valley or the Rust Belt? The Outback in Australia, that's kind of a common folk term. Where does the Outback start and end? Do you have an answer for that? What about Latin America? Some people say that Mexico further south to Argentina is all Latin America. Some people disagree. What about functional regions? Functional regions are also called nodal regions because they revolve around a node, a function, that essentially serves as a hub that links the region's features together. So an example would be JFK Airport. The airport is the node, the function, but the region consists of all the flight paths that depart and arrive at the airport. The New York City subway system also is a functional region, as well as radio reception areas and power grids and other utilities in an area. The function is the power grid and the region is the area that the power is given to. Let's do some region practice. What kind of region is a mental map? A mental map here is shown on the side. It's a map you create just using your mind, your mental capacity. So using what you know, you can create a mental map on how to get to school. But this is going to vary from person to person. So this is a vernacular region. What kind of region is the Islamic practicing entity in the UK? What type of region is that? Where are people practicing Islam in the UK? I have a map here, right here. It's kind of green. So what kind of region is that? That's a formal region because that's not up to debate. We know where Islamic people are practicing in the United Kingdom. Western Europe is vernacular. It can vary from person to person. The Grand Canyon, that's a physical feature. That's going to be a formal region. What about the newspaper routes of a particular area? That's going to be a functional region as well. All right, we did Unit 1. Congrats. Like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Leave a comment down below or message me on Discord if you have any questions. I will be glad to answer them. Go check out some resources or the lecture if you want something a little more in-depth. I'll see you in the next video, though. Adios.